Good morning, everybody. My name is Kathleen M, and I'm here to do my presentation on the sex work debates, specifically around the assigned reading today by Miriam. And this reading was called Stopping the Traffic in Women, Power, Agency, and Abolition in Feminist Debates Over Trafficking. So on the agenda today, I made this just so we could have, or you could have a little understanding of where I'm headed with my points. So we're going to do a little background of the article, history of sex work, where we are today with sex work, and then we're going to end it off with a couple discussion questions that we can talk about after the video. So in the Miriam reading, she discusses the opposing theoretical debates on sex work. The theory that she supports is the abolitionist position. The abolitionist believes in the criminalization of sex work. Referencing Carol Pateman, Miriam explains that the abolitionist's main question is not whether or not or why not women choose to be sex workers, but why women's bodies are sold and demanded by men in a capitalist structure. The pro-sex work or liberalism would be the opposite of the abolitionist. Pro-sex advocates support women's freedom, choice to be sex workers or prostitutes, and they also aim to make a distinction between a woman's choice to be a sex worker and forced prostitution and sex trafficking. Throughout the article, Miriam reviews liberalism with the radical feminist critique and explains that from the radical feminist standpoint, freedom is, quote, something in one's head and in one's thoughts, unquote. She also continues on to critique the contract between the sex worker and the employer, suggesting that it supports a dehumanizing domination and subordination relationship, particularly arguing that freedom of choice or agency and victimization of the woman are not mutually exclusive conditions in the realm of sex work, whereas a pro-sex work advocate would believe that it is. And so I thought it would be helpful as well to bring in a little different material to this particular topic and help gain a better understanding of the debate of sex work, was to contrast past and present day. And I felt this way because there are many interesting and contributing factors that can be pulled upon to help us create a deeper understanding on the complexities of sex work and how it finds its place in our world today. So I have 3 pictures here. One's of a monkey, one's of kind of like technology, it's supposed to indicate the economy, and then I have kind of an ancient Egyptian photo. So, getting into it, over history, sex work has definitely evolved. Prostitution is one of the oldest occupations that we know of, next to the midwife. And it has been done since ancient times, specifically in places like Egypt and Greece. It is believed that sex work is a job that was developed when money and the economic markets began to establish themselves. And this idea became even more interesting after a 2005 study done by Keith Chen, a behavioral economist, published his monkey research that showed that monkeys who truly understood money would exchange it for sex. It was one of the first things they did once they understood what you could do with the exchange of money. Although they offered grapes instead of real currency, the idea was still there. And this study really just pushes the fact that sex is something that not only all mammals do, but it is a desire that is deeply rooted in our nature, and it's something that, is extremely human. Wanting to have sex and wanting those connections. So it's very true now as it was back then. For example, one of the main differences between sex workers then and now type of is sex worker, find them. Private worker, sex workers, or prostitutes were historically found in brothels, specialized specifically in things like gambling houses, whereas also today, especially with the advancement of technology, there are many different variations of a sex worker, a sugar baby types of services that they offer. It's still an exchange of a relationship, sort of, but instead of offering sex, the woman or girl of mature age, typically sugar babies are women in their 20s or early 30s, but they would go on dates with older men and offer them almost like an emotional exchange rather than a sexual one. And the man would offer them some type of financial security, pay them money, just to go on dates with them. And it's definitely become a more popularized form of sex work, kind of, because it doesn't really involve sex at all. It's pretty clean that way, but it's still an exchange in the sense that they're going on dates. And going back to history, although women were still looked at as less than the man, the occupation of being a sex worker was not completely shunned upon, although it was tolerated and not really celebrated. People didn't love that you were a sex worker, but it was something that was normal. And women also relied on it for an easier financial life. So pushing things to where we are today with sex work. So we really came a long way in regards to, or I shouldn't even say come a long way. We've gone through a lot of transitions between accepting sex work as an occupation to abolishing it. And I'm just looking at okay. So, yeah, contrast to Miriam's support to remove sex work from society, there are currently 15 countries around the world that have legalized prostitution. Countries such as New Zealand, Australia, Austria, Colombia, France have all decriminalized sex work. And for me, one of the most surprising countries to see on that list was Canada. So Canada has laws around sex work, but it is legal to sell sex, although it is illegal to purchase sex. And from that, I'm sure you can kind of see how there could be a flaw in that. And the point of it was to target the client, but it didn't really help things for the sex worker because they still cannot access healthcare services or EI, things like that. And it's also difficult for them to negotiate prices with their buyer or however you would describe them. And in comparison to other countries around the globe, Canada's laws are some of the most restrictive. In contrast, New Zealand is one of the countries which has fully decriminalized sex work. Factors that contributed to that decision was to create better working conditions for the workers, protect their health and safety, and also develop a better relationship between the workers and the police. So, in the case that they were in danger or they were being like treated violently and needed to reach out to the police, they do not have a fear of being arrested, so they can fully confident call the police in a time of need. Some Asian countries, such as Thailand and the Philippines, are well known for their sex tourism. So, sex tourism has mainly been middle-aged white men from North America or around the world coming to see what they would call, I wouldn't consider this to be a correct term, but exotic women, different women. And out of this, there has become a serious issue with child prostitution, which is really sad. So a lot of men are demanding younger women, which leads to younger girls, and that has definitely become a serious issue in places like the Philippines and Thailand. But overall, we generally live in an open society now. People are free to make their own choices and think their own thoughts. And how sex work is viewed, it definitely varies based on the place and the person, where you were born and what you were taught. And for as long as we know it, sex work has consistently and historically been part of our society. And for that reason, it makes it a little bit difficult to pick a side to be on. Personally, I believe that freedom of choice is important. And if it's a occupation that feels liberating for a woman and she wants to do it, then I believe that she should have that choice. But I would also like to note that I thought Miriam made an interesting point by questioning why women's bodies are treated like supply and demand. So I wanted to end things off with a couple discussion questions that we can talk about after the video, and just kind of get your thoughts on some of the things that I touched on in this video. So my first question is, do you believe sex work to be a normal and natural part of society? Why or why not? And can a sex worker be victimized unknowingly, even with a mutually agreed upon contract? Or does that contract free her from being victimized? And these were a couple ideas that I thought of throughout the reading and throughout this video, and I just kind of wanted to know what you thought of that, especially for the first question, because sex work is so historic. Does that make it normal? Is it just a part of our world and we should accept it? Or is it dehumanizing? Anyway, I want to thank you all for listening to my video, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about my questions. And if you have questions for me, feel free to ask. Thank you.